So almost 2 years ago, I changed from a Micro Four Thirds camera to an APS-C camera. In today's video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the reasons why I did that, if I regretted it, and if I would do it again if I had the choice nowadays. So let's talk first about the reason why I sold my Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II camera and instead bought this Fujifilm X-H1 camera. To be entirely honest, and I'm not very proud about it, I still had gear acquisition syndrome. I was just coming out of a phase when I had been buying and selling a lot of cameras, really wanting to try everything and see what it's like, kind of hoping that it would help me take better pictures, when really the only way to take better pictures would have been and still is to go out and take more photos. So the main reason why I bought the XH1 at the time, or at least that's what I thought, next to the gear acquisition syndrome, was that it had a slightly larger sensor. I sometimes found with the Olympus camera, when I was taking pictures at sunrise in low light, that the pictures were a little bit grainy, not really grainy, but a little bit noisy in the shadows. To be honest, that's something that I didn't like very much, so that was one reason. And then the other big reason was that at the time I was extremely interested in these film simulations that these Fujifilm cameras have. I was very intrigued by that. I wanted to spend less time in Lightroom processing the photos, and I had this idea that with the correct film simulations, digital photography could feel a little bit like film photography, where I just take my photos and have the end result without having to do any post-processing. So now let's talk a little bit about what I love about my Fujifilm camera now. What I do like, let's take it off here, is the big grip here. That's something which is important to me because I've got relatively big hands, and I don't like when cameras are small and they almost slip out of my hands. It's even happened to me in the past. I can't remember exactly which camera it was, but I distinctly remember a camera falling out of my hands because it was so flimsy, so difficult to hold. So this one, it's a pretty big camera for an APS-C camera. I like that a lot. Another thing I really like is the IBIS, the sensor stabilization. That's really quite useful, because one problem I had with my old Nikon D800 is that a lot of photos ended up being quite blurry, and somehow I'm a slightly rushed guy, I think. I find it hard to always put my camera on a tripod. I know that's a little bit stupid, but when I go on my hikes, I don't like to stop for ages. I quite like to take my camera out, take a picture and move on. So I had this problem with my old cameras where the handheld shots were often blurry, and with the IBIS in here, that's a thing of the past. It works really well. I can have slower shutter speeds and still have sharp photos, so that's something I really do like. Another thing I really like is the aperture ring that you have on the Fujifilm cameras, on the lens directly. Also, I do like the film simulations. As I mentioned before, that was one of the main reasons why I bought this camera. And I have to admit, I used them for a little while, and now I just shoot in RAW again with this camera, because I just didn't get the result that I like to get from my photography. I realized that when I take black and white photos, I rely heavily on emphasizing certain parts of the photos, you know, making some parts brighter and some parts darker. And when I have the film simulations, I really rely on this instant moment, this picture. And I noticed that quite often I want to go take this photo and change something about it. And while in RAW, it's easier to do that than taking a JPEG and then letting it break apart too quickly. Also, when you look at the top of this camera, you've got these two dials where you can set the ISO and the shutter speed. Well, I thought that I would really enjoy that, because it does look a little bit retro, you know, like a little bit stylish, or at least I thought beforehand. Well, to be honest, I don't use it all that much. Let's talk a little bit about what surprised me about this camera. One thing that surprised me straight from the beginning was the price. I found that buying it used on the second-hand market, it's a real bargain. I mean, the pictures you get from this, the quality, everything, no, it's cheap. I don't know, that's all I can say about it. Another thing that surprised me was when you take pictures at higher ISO. With my old cameras, they often became quite noisy and the photos wouldn't be really that usable anymore, especially because at the time you didn't have all these great algorithms to reduce the noise. But with this camera, when I take a picture at a higher ISO, quite often I get a certain grain that I quite enjoy. I mean, I still can't go too high, I find, but it's not as bad as with other older cameras. So finally, the thing that surprised me the most and that I like the most about this camera is the black and white preview. I can walk around. Obviously, that wasn't possible with my Nikon D800 because it wasn't a mirrorless camera. But I really enjoy being able to see what a scene will look like in black and white. I can see, the different lines, the different elements much better than in color, and it really helps me decide if I want to take a picture here in black and white or not. I mean, I realize that a lot of the things I've said so far would also apply to a lot of other cameras, to Nikon, Sony, etc. And maybe that hints a little bit at what I'm thinking about my camera decisions like 2 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about the limitations for me personally. One thing that a lot of people say about these cameras, and I have to agree, is that the autofocus is good, but not always perfect. For my style of photography, it doesn't really matter because I usually take environmental black and white atmospheric photos while I'm hiking, where your subjects, the mountains and the clouds, are not going to suddenly jump up and run away. But I can understand that for other people this might be a little bit of a limitation. So not long after I bought this camera, I went to Northumberland in England to take photos of the puffins on a little island. And it was a beautiful day. I put on the big lens, but quite often I did notice that I wasn't always able to acquire focus and take the pictures I wanted to take compared to the photographers next to me who had different kind of cameras. So autofocus, sometimes a little bit of a struggle. And one thing I noticed as well is that even though I enjoy the really big grip of this camera, it's a quite big and heavy, large camera for an APS-C camera. And I could have got myself a full-frame camera with a similar weight and size as well. And this ties in with another thing I noticed, is that sometimes I like to crop my photos a little bit. And even though it's got enough megapixels, honestly, but if I had slightly more megapixels, I would just have a little bit more freedom to do that. So that's something I notice sometimes. The result is that I try to crop my photos a little bit less. So let's talk a little bit about what I miss about Micro Four Thirds. The main thing I would say is how light and cheap the cameras and the lenses are on the second-hand market. Another thing I really love about Micro Four Thirds, or specifically about the Olympus camera that I used at the time, was the autofocus and how brilliant it was for macro photography. I really enjoyed that camera for taking photos of really small subjects. Yeah, I do miss that, and I don't really do macro photography so much anymore nowadays because of that. I also think that the Micro Four Thirds systems are amazing for wildlife photography, even though I don't have much experience with that. So, do I regret that decision I took 2 years ago? Well, not really. I mean, on one side I miss the Olympus camera, but this Fujifilm camera is great as well. I think what it helped me realize was that I was buying and selling too many cameras, and by the time I got this camera and started regretting my old camera, I thought, well, the camera is not really the issue. The issue is in here. It's the photographer, or the photography, or the photographer who is always too busy to go out and take pictures. So I realized that the camera, most of the cameras nowadays are good. I mean, they've got some pros, some cons, but most of them are good enough to take good photos, At least I'm speaking from the perspective of a hobby photographer who does that during the weekend for myself, to have a great time out there. I'm not speaking for professional photographers. That's a completely different issue, and I obviously wouldn't want to talk for them, because that's not my world. But for a hobby photographer, it really doesn't matter all that much, does it? So for now, I'm really happy with my Fujifilm X-H1, and I don't consider changing, even though I sometimes miss doing macro photography. The only thing that I sometimes think about a little bit when I'm editing my photos is how I can't crop all that much. So that will really depend on how many photos I take. If I'm really consistent over the months taking loads of photos and I notice that there would be a real benefit, then I might consider starting to think about upgrading to something with more megapixels. But if I do that, and when, I'll be really careful, because I'm just so aware of the trap of gear acquisition syndrome. And I think if I do it, I'll also do it differently from the past. I would rent cameras first, 1 or 2 cameras, like just be really careful about it. But for now, I'll keep taking pictures with my Fujifilm X-H1. So now I'd like to hear from you. Let me know in the comments if you can relate to my reasoning. Have you used Micro Four Thirds? Are you on Fujifilm? What are your thoughts about changing from one system to another? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I hope you have a beautiful day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.